Example, we're ready to go. There you go. All right. I'd like to call this meeting of the. We also had a little bit of feedback there. Let me know when we're ready to go. Yeah. All right. I'd like. Before I call the meeting to order, do you think we could mute the audio coming out of that computer there?
I think that one is.
So you know when we're ready to go. Yeah. Fill the void.
So when you talk about the beautiful library.
Yeah, but this building is really remarkable, this room. Like maybe we could age wine in here.
How's that?
Is it coming out of the tube?
That's a problem. Yeah.
Volume is off.
Yeah.
You did that time with first
It's okay, it's like, no, it's all
Let's give it another shot.
right.
Thanks.
I think we're doing better this time around. Okay, I'm gonna call this meeting of the Library Financing Authority to order. We have a roll call, please.
Director Goldstein,
Here.
Director Schmidt,
Here.
Director Lago,
Here.
Director Palacios.
Here.
Director Hoffaker is absent.
Okay. I believe Director Huffaker is represented by his alternates.
Correct.
Correct. Okay. Additional materials. Do we have any additional information that was submitted after the agenda packet was distributed?
No additional materials,
Okay. Any changes this morning to the agenda?
no changes.
Great. That takes us to public comment, which is the opportunity for any member of the community to address the board on items that are not on today's agenda. Do we have any comments this morning, please? This is about the Library Financing Authority's authority, which is financing for library facilities.
Yes, the mic on?
It doesn't appear to be.
Can you turn it on?
Oh, it might be right there.
I think with the size of the room, we might be able to hear you, sir. And the mic here will pick you up for the streaming, if that doesn't work.
Okay, yeah, you need to plug them down. Oh, good. Oh, well, Marilyn Garrett is here. She's Marilyn Garrett is a very historical figure. Marilyn Garrett and her husband stopped the deployment of DDT. They sued the chemical companies. That's why we're not being sprayed by DDT anymore. Welcome, Marilyn. Anyway, I'd like to speak about censorship. Censorship of library materials is unacceptable and has severe social consequences. congressional testimony recently, that's going on right now under oath. Dr. Fauci exposes the lies and fraud of the official COVID narrative. There is no scientific or medical basis for mask wearing or social distancing and other factors of this whole debacle, which is being shown right now under oath. I'm pointing out that, the Library Bill of Rights, which is published here by the American Library Association, is being violated here in Santa Cruz. We have Leon Cameron, a retired school psychiatrist for 35 years, has written a book, The Unfortunate Truth About Vaccines, which is being censored and prevented from being read by people here in Santa Cruz. The outcome of these problems of fraud, lies, and censorship is the lack of truthful information and resources and informed public to make intelligent choices in their lives. Teen suicide is one example of the outcome of this situation. In this winter edition 2023 of the Wesley Price Foundation is an account of a mother talking about the suicide of her daughter during this whole COVID thing, because the daughter did not have access to information to make a really a good choice and have a good outcome with her life. And to knowingly continue with this policy of active censorship, you are participating in these social outcomes. So these teens, the teen suicide rate has quadrupled during this whole COVID debacle because the people haven't had information to make these good choices, to make choices based on relevant information. And the library participating in censorship is contributing to this problem. So you have blood on your hands if you continue this policy of censorship. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment this morning?
Excuse me. I'd like to address two things. One is Wi-Fi in the library. Wi-Fi is a health hazard. And those of you who have seen me over the years know I have presented evidence to you repeatedly. And I have a flyer here. Let's just go over some of the symptoms. The tremors I have are related to what I think are two things. I taught in Colorado Valley School, excuse me, next to fields pesticides have neurological impact. So is the Wi-Fi radiation similarly. And what are some of the most important symptoms of microwave radiation? Neurological. If you listen to these, think of yourself. The people may have these symptoms: headaches, dizziness and nausea, memory and concentration difficulties, insomnia, depression and anxiety, fatigue and weakness, numbness and tingling, muscle and joint pain, cardiac, heart palpitations, shortness of breath, heart arrhythmia, high blood pressure, eyes, pain, burning or pressure in the eyes, ears, ringing in the ears, hearing loss. A lot of people think they have tinnitus. It's often microwave thought. Other problems, digestive disorders. Libraries should be a safe place. We should not be getting irradiated or poisoned in the libraries. And it's just a fact. This is a toxic technology. It's the elephant in the room. The other point is the author of this book approached the library, The Unfortunate Truth About Vaccines, exposing the vaccine orthodoxy. This should be in the library. And I also want to pull item D from the consent agenda, which has to do with library summer reading, and have that on the regular agenda. This book, briefly, and many other books is extensively documented using government sources as well as medical journals, MDs, scientific researchers, and investigative organizations. How can citizens reach sound conclusions unless we have access to science from professional researchers and practitioners that are allowed to?
Thank you for your comment. That's been 3 minutes.
Okay.
Thank you for your comment. That's been 3 minutes.
In a lot here. Okay,
Anyone else wish to address this board on items that are not on today's agenda?
thank you.
Hi, I'm Jay Rosella Myers, and I would just like to address the issue of not having, access to books in general that might be controversial and actually add to our informational knowledge, especially about health issues. And a friend of mine called me this morning, and he had requested that the library put in Your Body's Many Cries for Water, which was done from a study of a man who had been in prison somewhere in Europe. You know, that was not a valid imprisonment, but he was there for a long time. And during that time, he made a study of hydration and how it was so important to have hydration as a physical well-being aspect. And he has requested many times that the library carry this book. And it's a very popular, well-known book for health issues. But there are many, many other books. Arthur Firstenberg's Invisible Rainbow, which talks a lot about the effects of electricity from way back when, like in the telegraph days, how there were effects historically that affected people's well-being. That book is the mainstay of how we are impacted by these invisible electrical sources that we have come to rely on. But then there's also local authors that we all would love to see. You know, just recently, and I don't know if it's here yet, but Marigold Fine wrote a great book called Double Rainbow. I went to a book reading at Bookshop Santa Cruz, written Women Tell the Truth, and it was all about women who are over 80, who told their personal stories. And these kinds of books, especially local authors, should be included in our library resources. So please, I hope to urge you to have an open mind about suggestions that people have for incorporating things into the library. We love the libraries. I've loved it since I was a kid. It was a great adventure to go and find out new information. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment this morning on the LFFA agenda? Seeing none, I'll close public comment and take us to libraries director's report. We have a report this morning.
It's been submitted, Chair. Right.
All right, thank you. Next item then is the consent calendar. There's 2 items on today's consent. Do you want to take public comment on consent? All right,
Wait, no, is this the MOU or is that the other?
that'll be on the JPA agenda. All right, seeing no public comment on consent.
I requested an item on consent to address D.
That's on the other agenda for the next meeting this morning.
Oh, my God, 2 agendas?
2 All right, board, do we have a motion to approve consent, or does any board member want to pull an item for discussion?
Move to approve consent calendar.
Second.
All right. All those in favor, let's do a voice vote, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, that motion carries unanimously. That takes us to item, I'm missing a page, give me a second. General business, which is a presentation by Mr. Barango and Bonnie Borgano. Thank you, I'm sorry, apologize for messing up the name. Plans for supporting the completion of the downtown branch library. Your staff presentation, please.
Great, thank you. I'm Bonnie Lipstone, with the City of Santa Cruz Economic Development and Housing, and it's a pleasure to be here this morning. Brian Berguno, who is pulling up the presentation, is actually the project manager for the Downtown Library Affordable Housing Project, and he will be giving the majority of the presentation. I just wanted to kick this off and give an overview of what we'll be talking about today, and then we'll both be available at the end for any questions that you have. So our project team at the city, this is a really big project for the city. We're really excited about it. It's on our largest surface parking lot in the downtown, and we have a number of partners. So we have partnered on this project with For the Future Housing and Eden Housing. And we have two architect teams working on that. Jason Architecture, which is primarily working on the actual library component, working in conjunction with Tinover, which is the architect for the future. And together, there are teams on the library project. So this project has been a long time in coming. We're really excited to present it to you today. We've made a lot of exciting progress over the last few years. And so first up, we'll talk about the highlights of recent progress on the project. We'll go into more detail on the design process and the building permits. We're going to skip over the farmers market update. That's more of interest, I think, to our city council, but we're available for any questions on that at the end. And then we'll talk about the budget, our overall budget for phase one and phase two. Phase one being certain components of the project, including the shell and core of the library, and then phase two being the tenant improvements for the library. We'll talk about a project schedule update, where we are in the overall timeline, and then conclude with next steps. So highlights of recent projects. We recently secured a $33.5 million award from the ASIC program, that's Affordable Housing Sustainable Communities grant. And it's a funding award that has a number of components to it. And with that specific award, we've been able to bring 11 million additional dollars for infrastructure improvements in the surrounding area. So we're really excited about that, including some transit improvements. We also have a workforce development grant component of that we're leveraging with Digital Nest and Santa Cruz Works to provide paid apprenticeships into companies in Santa Cruz. So we're pretty excited about some of the ancillary benefits of some of the funding that's been awarded to the project. We've also recently acquired the Total Fitness site, which was the last piece we needed to have full site control. And it was also a critical piece for being able to submit our funding applications for tax credits for the project. And we've been working with Total Fitness on relocating their fitness facility. We also recently submitted the end of April, our California Tax Credit Allocation Committee application, and we've had really good feedback so far. We're very competitive, so we're hoping we're going to secure that funding. Brian will go into more detail on that too when we get into some of the budget. And then we're also, after going through the concept and design development phase, we're now in the construction drawing phase and have submitted to our planning and building department and are in the process of getting review comments back. So we're expecting to finalize that in early fall. And I think with that, I'm going to turn it over to Brian to really go into the detail of the design progress and some renderings of the library and the budget.
Brian Berguno, Development Manager for the Economic Development Department. It's going to be a little awkward with Bonnie steering, so hopefully we can move through these relatively smoothly. But thank you for the opportunity to bring this project forward to you. We've been meeting with our city council regularly, and we've been meeting with some of our partners in downtown, but it's a really great opportunity to come back at this stage in the project to bring back a report on where we are with this pretty significant library project, in addition to the affordable. So this is where we are with the building permit phase. We expect the plan check to be completed by October 2024. We already started receiving comments, but because it's a iteration of, back and forth between the design teams and comments from the different departments in the city, it'll take about, a few more months for us to get to the final completion of that process, at which point the construction documents will be 100% and the building permit will be ready to be issued for construction. So during this time, this is primarily on the phase one component of the project. It's broken up into two phases. Phase one will deliver the affordable housing, childcare center, the core and shell for the library, which includes the facade and the infrastructure needed to host the library tenant improvements, which is phase two. So this phase is underway for the building permit, but there'll be a second permitting process for the phase two. They're near construction completion as per the documents too, in the design phase, but they want to lag a little bit behind in case there's any feedback we get on phase one that will influence any design changes for phase two. So a little bit of a timing, just clarification there. The project overview, again, the library gross square feet interior is over 38,000 square feet with the addition of the rooftop deck that's dedicated to the library. That brings us to about a 41,000 square foot library for programming specific to library needs. We have ample bicycle parking and a parking garage component. And then in addition to that, the 124, 100% affordable housing units. One of those units is the manager's unit, and the breakdown is on the next slide. And so this is the breakdown of affordability. So not only is it affordable housing in a range of unit sizes, which is important to have 3-bedroom, 2-bedroom, 1-bedroom, studio apartments, but also a range of affordability. So this truly 100% affordable housing project is going to bring not only units for students and folks that might qualify for that, but also for families, which is why we think it's a great relationship between the housing, the library, the childcare, and the other components of this. Now we'll get to the more fun stuff, the updated renderings. Now that we've completed a pretty significant portion of design, this is these renderings are going to be pretty true to what the final construction documentation will result in. Next slide. So that's a view from Cedar and Lincoln. Next one's the opposite corner, Cedar and Cathcart. We can start to see some of the rooftop programming and green room for the library. This is the layout that kind of shows kind of how the housing, it begins on the podium level of the 3rd floor. So the housing starts to get programming for outdoor use and space, including a community room and patio, separate of the library patio that's dedicated to the library. A peek of some of the housing components. So this would be on that 3rd level podium, the community room and the community patio for the residential use. Another view just elevated where you can start to see some of the elements of the green room and then the outdoor elements for the residential component. Directly across the street, as if you were standing at the Red Church or the new development across the street on Cedar, which leads you into the main entry to the library. And then taking down, this would be the ground floor view of walking into the library entry. And this would be what you see when you walk into the main stair. If you're viewing to your left as you walk in, which leads into the children's area. On the right-hand side, not pictured, would be the circulation desk, drop off for books, as well as entry into the staff area and the community room. A view of the children's section with the stacks in the sitting area, the children's area. Some additional views of the children's area. They have their own checkout circulation desk, as well as additional viewpoints of the seating areas and the book stacks for the children's section. And then you would go upstairs to the 2nd level. This would be a quick-in view of as you come up and the atrium leading into the 2nd level, and you can start to see the mezzanine level that leads to roof deck. This would be pulling back, and now you have the teen section on your left. It gives you a visual. This would be as if you were interior standing on Cedar and Lincoln looking across the library. A close-up view of the teen area with their book stacks and seating area. The special collections room. And this would be the mezzanine as you come up the stairs, looking across the mezzanine where there's some additional book stacks, a baby grand piano, then leads you to the outdoor roof deck that's dedicated to the library use. And finally, the library rooftop deck, which would be, again, programming by them. And then we'll skip past the farmers market update. We're making progress with them. We do get asked, they're an integral part of our nation efforts to start construction, and we're moving right along with them. So now budget update. So this is the total breakdown by component of all the soft and hard costs rolled up into a final number and a percentage of kind of the representation of what each component makes up of the overall phase one project. Right now, we're anticipating a cost of $153.9 million for phase one. A large portion of that is related to the affordable housing component of the project. But as you can see, there is a portion for the library facade show dedicated to this phase one. Well, we've been busy resourcing the project. So at this point in time, we anticipate having about $154.3 million in being fully funded to begin construction of phase one. With our tax credit application that we should hear back from this month, if that will trigger a mandate to start construction by the end of January. And so all of these pieces are either secured or in process. Only two are not final. It's the tax credit application that we're awaiting, and then the parking garage financing debt issuance, which we're in the process of securing. So that just kind of breaks down, again, the layering of funding sources required just to get this phase one started. And of course, phase one has to happen in order for phase two. So phase two, again, we will be working on solidifying construction timelines for phase one. Once phase one starts, assuming we start in January, we have about a 6 to 12 month period of construction before phase two can even begin, because it won't be ready for us to go in and do the tenant improvements required to do the full build out of the library. So a little bit of a lag on phase two, predicated by phase one, but we have been busy securing funding for this phase and currently have approximately 18.5 million identified for this. And of course, because it's a library tenant improvement, it's not going to require as much resourcing as the initial phase one, which is going to deliver the full court shell, elevators, a lot of the components that are necessary to come in and do the finishes for the library. These are just a list of some of the funding sources we've already secured, and because we have a little bit of time before we will get to phase two construction, we're going to continue to resource this over the next year. We're identifying some additional grant opportunities and funding sources, in addition to the ones that are identified that are either mostly secured or pretty confident. Now, a schedule update, just to look at a big picture. So this has been a long project. Like, it started with a facilities master plan that I believe, started here at this board, but back in 2012. So it's been a long process to get us today. And we've had a lot of community input and feedback, and we're finally at the tail end where we're talking about construction phasing and making sure that we have the resources to bring this to fruition. And so in the grand scheme of things, thank you for the support from this board, because we wouldn't be here presenting back to you on this project without some of the initial work that went into the Measure S funding and went into the thought process behind updating all of the branches, and with this one being the last one that we're focused on. And then again, just next steps, the next slide, just kind of, this is our sequence of things that we have left to complete. Of course, the permit review phase for phase one, final funding sources for phase one, relocation of Total Fitness in the farmers market, and construction phase one start, and then we continue that same process for phase two, securing funding sources, finalizing building permit review, preparing bids, and then ultimately construction. The QR codes will take you to the project website where we have all this information, including the presentations. We post regularly there, at least quarterly. But if anybody wants some additional information about where we are, what's coming next, that's a great resource. And thank you again for the opportunity to present.
Thank you so much. Are there questions from board members?
Yeah, questions. I couldn't tell how much Measure S funding are you anticipating for the entire project?
That's a good question. So we have approximately 24.5 million dedicated to us for this particular branch, of which we've been receiving PAYGO funds from the assessment. And we have 10 million cash on hand, but another 14.3.5 left to bond for. And so we'll be back for that bonding effort in August for approval from this board if we get our tax credit granted to us this round.
Okay. And then what is the timeline to finish the entire project?
That's a good question. So if we start in January, we're looking at about 3.5 years of total completion. If we can start phase two as anticipated, about 12 months after, that'll all sync up and be done in about a 3-year cycle.
So 2028.
2020, mid-2027, 2020.
Any questions for the board members? I did have one question about the parking. thinking was 250 spaces. Is that shared between the housing and the library, or is that? No,
No, good question. So the 235 parking spaces are part of the downtown district supply of parking spaces. So it's being funded by the parking district and it'll be managed by the parking district as part of that public supply. Similar to the Locust Garage, the sub. Yeah. So it's unbundled from any of the specific uses on the site. It'll be paid parking and it'll be managed.
Where are the residents park? Yeah.
The residents will have the same opportunity as other residents in other downtown in the system. In this facility as well as other facilities in the system if they need it, but it won't be there. So similarly, across the street, there's 100 units of housing, affordable housing adjacent to the Red Church. They built 0 parking site. So the same residents, when you're in the downtown district, you can find park anywhere in the system, not just this.
thank you. Are there any other questions? All right, public comment. Do you have any public comment on this item? Go ahead.
Can I get up there?
Sure.
Just be careful of the cord.
Yeah.
Barbara?
Well, phase one, we have, I don't know, he said there was $10 million in hand. I've been having a hard time trying to get the figures for this. I asked a lot of people, a lot of times, how much money is left in Measure S? So from what I've heard, it's like about 14.5 million, plus the sale of the Sky Park property, another 8 million. So that's about 22 million. I don't know what this $10 million cash on hand is, and Ryan mentioned 24.5 million. Anyway. And then, so we have phase one, the shell. Then, I don't know, we only have 22 million. That's pretty much the extent of Measure S. Then we hear that there's $5 million from Measure S for phase two. Where's that come from? And so phase two, $18.5 million, where's that gonna come from? You know, what's the total for the whole library? Back in 2016, I think we were told it's $1,000 a square foot. Probably more than that now. And talking about 41,000 programmable feet. You know, what's the cost? Where's the money coming from? What happens if you don't get the grants you apply for? Will the green roof be eliminated? And, you know, it's still a lot of questions. When are we gonna see a floor plan that shows, you know, how big the kids area is, how big this lobby marketplace is, you know? How many bathrooms are there? How many study rooms are there? When are you gonna see these floor plans? It's been, you know, 8, 9 years already. Okay, I can go on, but this is still a lot of questions and we don't know where the money's coming from. And as far as the childcare, everybody makes a big deal out of that. I think there's only gonna be room for like 16 kids, so that's like a drop in the bucket. Okay, thanks.
All right, thank you. Is there any other public comments this morning on the Downtown Branch Library presentation?
Or here. There's the QR code up there to tell you. You have to use your cell phone for that. I don't have a cell phone. And I look at that. I don't know if this happens to anyone else. I get physically nauseated when I receive something at home with it. I get out. I look at this and of course the libraries are all gonna have all this Wi-Fi and antennas, right? So it makes people like me, they're supposed to be Americans with disability to have access. And this is a functional impairment caused by microwave radiation exposure. I don't think there should be Wi-Fi in libraries. Over the years, there used to be some libraries that didn't have it. And now they all do. This is a big problem. Another thing is that I see a lot of space in here for people to sit, but libraries are supposed to be mostly books and books. And A friend of mine was at the Aptos Library when they removed a whole lot of books. And thank you for your sharp. The financing of it. And, I like the old library, but I couldn't go there that much because the Wi-Fi and the antennas downtown on top of Elmore. So I just see a lot of problems with this and a lot of questions about money and where's the money going? Where's it coming from? Those are my comments. They're disappointing to me.
Thank you. Is there additional public comment?
Yeah.
Okay,
So, I really would like to point out that this parking proposal seems very challenging to me, especially since supposedly some of this housing is for low income, population. And yet you're saying that you'll have to apply for a permit. Will there be exemptions for people who have disabilities or who are in the low income bracket for these housing units that are gonna be part of this proposal? A question for you guys. And so has that been considered? Because a lot of the problems and even going downtown right now has to do with the lack of parking and the availability, especially for my son. Who I have a handicap. And so it's really important that there are areas that are more easily accessible for handicapped individuals. And I would imagine the low income folks maybe not be able to be equipped. And maybe you're thinking they're not gonna have cars, but if you're handicapped, you're certainly not gonna be riding a bicycle. And so these particular details of these issues are really important to me and for the criteria of the American Disabilities Act. And so if you indeed are trying to serve a part of the public, you know, and this seems like minor compared to this huge project, but it's really important if we are trying to serve the community in a better way. And I think I understood that the downstairs was going to be dedicated to children, but there are a lot of seniors who live in subsidized housing downtown, and they also are challenged to get around. Most of them don't have cars. Some are in wheelchairs. And is there on the lower level, like an area possibly could be dedicated for seniors as gathering places and to be able to hang out, which there are very few. I know a lot of them hang out in the street in front of the Palomar. But maybe that could be an addressed issue in the future. I just don't know. The whole idea of people bicycling or not having cars or not enough parking, all this housing, especially if they're students or I don't, it just, in my mind, of course, I'm from LA, everybody drove. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But thank you for all your efforts. Appreciate it.
thank you. Is there any other public comment this morning? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board. Are there any comments by board members?
Well, I'll just comment that, I easily, without using the QR code, found that presentation on the city's website, because you did kind of go through the numbers quickly. And so anyone who wants to go back and kind of see that in more detail, this presentation is on the Santa Cruz City website and shows all those funding sources and where the money is coming from for each phase. So I would encourage anybody with questions to check that.
Great. Any other comments? Thanks, Santa Cruz City staff, for coming this morning, giving us a presentation. It sounds like a really exciting project. I know it's been in the works for a long time and overcome a lot of hurdles. So, you know, if people have further comment, I do suggest that they attend Santa Cruz City Council meetings and Planning Commission meetings to provide design input. So thank you so much. That'll take us to the next item on today's agenda, which is our Library Facility Financing Authority bond capacity. Do we have a staff presentation this morning? Thank you, Edith. There you go. Well done.
Good morning.
Edith Driscoll, the treasurer controller, I think, for your library financing authority. Good morning, board members. Also on the phone, we have Suzanne Harrell from Harrell and Associates. She is your municipal advisor and has guided you through your first two bond issuances, and we're here to report kind of the status as you prepare for your next bond issuance. So I just want to confirm that we do have Suzanne on the phone.
Yes, I'm here. Thank you.
Yes. So the report you have in front of you answers the question about bond capacity. Going backwards a little bit, we provided some history here on how we got to this point, what the voters approved, and which of the different cities and counties have received their funds. As you know, we've built some libraries already, so those funds were needed. If your funds were not needed, the different entities were allocated what's called a pay-go. You heard someone mention the word pay-go. Pay-go means that we receive the taxes twice a year. The first call on that tax money is to service debt, to pay the debt. Once that debt has been paid, the additional funds have been distributed to the city and the county based on our previously arranged percentages. So the city has been receiving pay-go as we go along during this process, because they haven't needed very much funding. So when the question of funding comes up, there's a certain amount here that we have highlighted for you, the 14.3 million that is still available to be financed, but also the city has received pay-go and that they have paid that money. I'm going to turn over to Suzanne Harrell to really review anything else on this report, because this is her area of expertise, and then turn it back to your board questions that Suzanne might be able to answer. Suzanne, do you want to add to any of that?
Sure. Good morning, Chair and members of the board. The special taxes or the Community Facilities District was formed in 2016. And since that time, you collect about $4.4 million a year in special taxes. Right now, your debt service on the first two series of bonds is about $2.3 million a year. And so that leaves sufficient capacity in order to finance the remaining $14.3 million that the city of Santa Cruz has available under its original allocation. And I'm happy to answer any other questions.
Yeah, that's the answer.
All right, are there questions from the board?
I actually should ask Santa Cruz this question, but maybe they talk to you. When do they, what does Santa Cruz anticipate going, asking this board to issue a bond for the remaining portion of funds? Have they talked to you?
I can answer. I think it's mentioned maybe in the cover letter here that Suzanne Harrell needs, we always say we need 3 months, basically 3 months from when you authorize the financing to when you need to receive those funds. And so at this point, based on the timeline that is anticipated, we're looking at coming back to the board. Whose face am I looking at here? We're looking at coming back to the board in August to begin that process. So it's whenever your board says you need the funds.
Okay. Thank you. Are there other questions? I have one, and this, I'm not sure if it's an Edith or a Suzanne question. So there's kind of 3 different thresholds we're dealing with, if I remember correctly, in the LFFA. One is the total amount of funding that's allocated to the city of Santa Cruz in the LFFA. The second was the total bond capacity of the LFFA. And then the third is just the fiscal realities of the amount of revenue that the tax is generating, required coverage ratios, interest rates. Which one is the constraining factor on how much money Santa Cruz can receive at this point?
I would answer for Suzanne and let her finish.
Okay.
There's a capacity, the voters put a cap. So you can only bond up to what the voters approved.
So it's the 65 million or whatever that was, the total ceiling on LFFA debt?
And that's what I bounced back to Suzanne.
Okay. Is that the?
Hi, I'll just clarify that a little bit. Because interest rates are much lower than we anticipated during the formation process, the real limitation for the city of Santa Cruz at this point is the maximum allocation of the 31,250,000. because there's enough bonded capacity, definitely enough bonded capacity for what's remaining to allocate to them. So that's the real constraint is the allocation under your JPA.
Okay, if we were to amend the JPA, ballpark, how much additional bond capacity might be available in the measure is approved by the voters?
I can't quite say that right now, but I'm gonna say there will be about $1 million a year of special taxes that should be available annually. To either service debt or do more pay-go projects. Obviously, we'll need some coverage for that, so, maybe we're talking about bonding against, 700 and, 50 or 800,000. And again, there's a time limit on the years to collect the tax, so the longer before the bonds are issued, the less the proceeds will be, but the more the pay-go will be.
Okay, thank you, that's helpful.
Can I get clarification, Suzanne, you're talking about $1 million a year or $1 million over the total outstanding period?
$1 million a year after payment of debt service on the 3 series of bonds. So the 2 existing and a projected amount for the 3rd series.
Thank you.
Okay, are there other questions from board members? Take it to the public. This is the opportunity for the public to give us comments about the remaining bond capacity in the LFFA and the potential, I guess, our bond capacity status. Do we have any public comment this morning? Go ahead.
Ryan had mentioned $10 million. He's not here anymore, I guess, so. This is so confusing for the general public. What, is that $10 million, I just don't get it. $31,250,000. That's now what's available?
Is there any other,
Yeah.
is there any other public comment? Seeing that, I'll
Well, I have
Go,
the same
let's-
question, where is all of this money coming from? I don't see where there is.
Well, we don't see. Someone.
please make public comment from the podium.
Oh. I don't see where all of this money is coming from. People are losing employment, they're losing their homes, they have employment to pay for it. And isn't it true that the sources of income for the county have decreased and that the county's in great debt? That was what I understood from the budget hearings. So it just seems like if you don't have money, how can you do projects? People are hungry, there's higher priorities.
All right. Is there any other public comment this morning? Okay, seeing none, I'll bring it back. If you wanted, there's a question sort of about the remaining capacity for the city of Santa Cruz. Can you?
I'll let Suzanne speak to remaining capacity questions. I just wanted to clarify the question of pay-go. It's an old phrase. The money comes in, we service the debt, it's left over, we distribute based upon the agreements. That's called pay-go. If the city doesn't have an expense to expend against that, they save it. So it appears that they are presenting that they have an amount of pay-go that they're holding on to. And that's what it appears. I don't want to speak for their report. Suzanne, do you want to answer a question from Chair Goldstein? No?
No, I didn't.
Never mind, we've resolved.
I think the city representatives probably have a better idea of how much of the pay-go money that they've spent on the other library project to date and how much they've set aside for this one. So I'll have to defer. I know how much they've gotten in total, but I don't know how they've allocated it or what they've spent so far.
Okay, well, thank you. All right, I'll bring it back to the board for discussion.
I'll move to accept and file report.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. I guess before we take a vote on it, I'm a little bit curious about the remaining capacity. So I guess I would just suggest the city of Santa Cruz look into the remaining capacity and if we want to make some proposals or something to the LFFA, you know, I'd be interested in hearing what those could look like.
Well, we made remaining capacity. In the Measure S fund after everybody's been paid their allocations. Yeah, I think my board is gonna be interested in allocating it from the same formula. Whatever remaining capacity is there among all the entities.
Yeah, I'm not trying to predetermine how that would go. I was
Okay.
just suggesting if the city of Santa Cruz is interested, they can, you know, bring forward some proposals or obviously any of our members could, but it does sound like there is some remaining capacity. Okay, so we have a motion and a second to accept and file this report. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll do a voice vote. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Okay, with that. Unfortunately, I didn't print the last page of the agenda. I think that takes us to adjournment. Project updates and comments by board members. Seeing none, then we have our scheduled upcoming meetings. Our next meeting is at 9 a.m. at the Live Oak Annex on August 1st. And then lastly, adjournment. So with that, we are adjourned. And that takes us to the next order of business, which is the board meeting for the Santa Cruz City County Libraries Joint Powers Authority Board. I will call the meeting to order and note that the same members are present as were present for our last meeting. So, do we have any additional material this morning?
Yes, staff received one email relating to agenda item 9A, one email relating to agenda item 9D, and 3 general emails not relating to any agenda item. These have been distributed to the board and are available for public review online under agenda item 13 entitled Written Correspondence at the end of the agenda, and hard copies are available as well.
Thank you. Are there any additions or deletions to the agenda this morning?
No additions or deletion.
Okay. That takes us to public comment this morning. In an effort to kind of move along our agenda, I think I'm going to take public comment this morning on any items that are not on today's JPA agenda. I'm going to limit the public comment to 2 minutes. Is there any public comment?
So I have a question. There are 2 meetings.
Ma'am, your opportunity to make public comment isn't.
Okay. Something else here in my collection. Okay. Oops. So there was just a finance meeting, and then this is the joint powers authority for the city and county of Santa Cruz. You're just starting that one and trying to understand, because I read it started at 9 a.m. Is that right? There's like two.
This is the JPA meeting for the library.
Okay. It's extremely important to have books that have different points of view, different scientists and sources. And this shirt is actually, it's a fact shirt. You know, the hand sanitizers are chocolate. COVID-19, myths and truths about COVID-19. Is it a contagious virus or 5G microwave technology? It turns out that epidemiological observations and biological studies indicate the symptoms of COVID-19 are radiation poisoning symptoms from 5G that first rolled out in Wuhan with thousands of sites. People need to be able to read about this. And this followed, I think I'll pass out some titles on it from Western Paper Foundation. An excellent book that I don't think you carry either.
Okay, that's your 2 minutes. Please wrap.
Okay, there's a 3 minutes.
It's 2 minutes. Please
Okay.
wrap up.
Okay, so, another book I want to see is called,
Thank you. Is there any additional public comment this morning on the JPA agenda? Seeing none, I'll close public comment and take us to the next item, which is report by library director. Do we have a report?
Yes, I've submitted the report in writing.
Okay, great. Thank you. Then we have the report by Friends of Santa Cruz Public Libraries. Do we have a report this morning?
Yes, if you don't mind, I'll just stay right here.
That's perfectly fine.
I have wonderful news. We have offered the position of permanent executive director of Friends to a candidate, and she has accepted. Her name is Sarah Paulson Beck. She is currently executive director for Pacific Heart in Berkeley. Previously, she was in a very similar position in Pennsylvania. She has a total, just in those two jobs, of about 10 years of nonprofit leadership, fundraising, and event planning and strategic planning. And amazingly, she is a resident of Santa Cruz. She has a child in the city schools. So she brings two things to us: fresh eyes, but a knowledge and an understanding of our community. She is currently having to cope with a family issue in another state. We expect that she will be able to join us somewhere starting June 24th to the end of the month. But I'm excited to introduce her to you, and we are all excited to be working with her. I do want to take this quick opportunity to thank Dr. Monica Parikh, who has served as our interim executive director from January 2nd, and she will serve until the end of June. She stepped in very unexpectedly for all of us, got the office organized, kept our doors open, kept us raising money and giving us good advice on how to conduct our business. And she did it with her leadership skills and exceptional bravery to step into them. So I want to thank Monica for everything she has done for us. And that's my, I just take any questions, but we're excited.
Thank you so much, and congratulations on hiring an executive director. That's a big step.
Big step.
Yeah,
Thank you.
okay. That takes us to our next order of business, which is a report by the Advisory Commission, the LAC. Do we have a LAC representative here this morning? Okay. And that'll take us to the next order of business this morning, which is the consent calendar. To take public comment on consent, we'll limit that to 2 minutes in an effort to keep moving things along. Do we have any public comment this morning on the consent calendar?
Thank you.
Make the comments.
Okay. The MOU between the city and the library. Oh, no, I'm sorry, that's about a generator. No. The budget adjustment about the opening day collection. In the staff report, the library. Just talking about the books that are gonna be moved from the existing library to the new library. Since some of the books may be move to the new library. So, I was concerned that there was gonna be some kind of a large, I know they get this opening day collection, but there's a lot of valuable books in the existing collection, and just because they, don't look snazzy for an opening day collection doesn't mean they should be discarded. I know, Sarah Harbison and has developed a very comprehensive collection development policy, so just worried that you're gonna see fewer books, wide scale book discarding going on when the new branch is about to open, and I object to that.
Yeah. Any other comments on the consent calendar this morning?
Yes. There's one on the summer reading plan. Right. Okay. I have some suggestions for summer reading. Thanks for your comments again. Books being removed. It's very disturbing. Here's some suggestions. The real Anthony Fauci, Bill Gates, Big Pharma, and the Global War on Democracy and Public Health by Robert F. Kennedy Jr. The substantiation in this book, the documentation for the statement is so irrefutable. This should be read. Here's just a comment of Mark Christian Miller. The story of Dr. Fauci's rise and reign is really all about the absolute corruption of our major institutions, government, medicine, academia, and above all, the press by Big Pharma and the Gates Foundation. Those of us who really do believe in science have this book to help rid the world of that corruption. Mark Crispin Miller, professor of media studies at New York University, editor News 100. This is a really valuable book to read. Another, because we keep hearing about more variants, more vaccines, more shots. They don't talk about people getting ill from the injection. Again, the unfortunate truth about vaccines, exposing the vaccine orthodoxy by William Canero. The second edition is coming out.
You got your 2 minutes. Thank you very much.
Is that 2 minutes?
Yeah.
Okay. That's just a few of the books.
Does anyone else want to make public comment this morning on the consent calendar? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board. Does anyone want to pull any item from consent?
Move approval of the consent calendar.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
The consent calendar passes unanimously. Takes us to the next order of business this morning, which is a presentation by Steve Toller from Baker Tilly about the library's 10-year financial forecast. Welcome, Mr. Toller.
It feels like a reunion. Hello, everybody. Good to see you again. Let me bring up the slide deck for 1 second.
Steve, before you start too, would you go to the virtual, the Zoom,
Sorry.
and just share your screen so that people online can see what you're presenting?
There we go.
There you go.
Anyway, it's good to see you all again. Steve Toller, I'm the director with Baker Tilly. I'm joined by Matt Stark, who is the chief architect and engineer of the fiscal model that we've prepared for the library. We have a brief presentation. You've received a copy of the presentation as part of your agenda packet. And so we're just going to go over some of the brief highlights, if you will, from the development of the fiscal model, and go through that with you. So yep, so we basically conducted and developed the fiscal model for the library. We also did an assessment, identification of any fiscal gap that potentially could exist within the library JPA finances, if you will, in terms of what its responsibilities are for any capital needs or other things. We have a few items that we'll talk about with respect to that, but we really want to go through and really what the forecast shows in terms of the big picture, and as especially you are about to about the budget for fiscal 25. Financial forecasting is really an imprecise effort in that you can't exactly predict what's going to happen 5 or 10 years from now. But what you do is you hope to be able to create a model that is credible, that is transparent in terms of what the assumptions upon which it's based, the factual data upon which it's based in terms of baseline data, historical data, as well as the proposed budget. And then, really being able to tell a story, really. And if there's one truth when it comes to financial forecasting, is that the numbers never sleep. There's always going to be changes as it relates to trends, because as we see, and have seen over time, things change. And so we just need to have and need to use a forecast model that is adaptive to help you understand what the potential impacts are as circumstances change as we move down the pike. And so with that kind of as a backdrop, let me give you the overview of really what the fiscal model indicates. The operational impacts during the pandemic were such that the district was able, and the libraries were able to use reduced staffing levels, and so the expenditures were down, but your revenues for the most part continued to come in, and that led to some surpluses that led to reserves, or the amounts that are in the piggy bank, if you will, right, for the JPA to grow from about 5 million to 11 million over that time. However, as we look at now coming out of the pandemic and moving forward, there is an imbalance between revenues and expenditures that, if left unabated, could end up seeing a fiscal gap that grows to about $2.5 million per year. And again, if not ameliorated in one way, shape, or form, could have an impact on the reserves to fall below a minimum reserve threshold by 28 in that rough time frame. At about fiscal 30 or so, you would see it starting to drop out of below zero. And so there are some actions that I think in the future the board is going to have to take. There is time to deal with that. But I think that as you look over the next couple of years, you're going to have to make some decisions in terms of how to right size the operational budget for the JPA. So let me just, again, I kind of touched on this in my comments, but as you saw and you see on the screen here, the reserves did grow over the last few years. And again, we've seen that a lot in other library agencies. We've seen that with recreation districts. We've seen that with cities' recreation programs, where services were reduced during that time frame, but revenues potentially have the ability to come in and be able to address that, especially when they are funded by property tax revenues that continue to come in. And so that is what happened here with this, with the library. And so we've seen reserves that have grown, and that has helped serve you well in terms of being able to address any future gaps that come in the future. But ultimately, that imbalance on an annual basis is going to have to be addressed. It's the same concept as using, money that's in a piggy bank in your personal savings account to weather the storms in terms of what's happening in the future. But that is going to have to be addressed. And so with that, let me turn it over to Matt real quick, who will talk with you a little bit about the model itself, what it included, and some of the key assumptions upon which it's based. And then I'll come back and help on wrapping up in terms of telling the story and address any questions.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you again for having us. As Steve touched on, the value in these models is to make them flexible, transparent, believable. And so one of our philosophies is to show our, and so as we turn this over to the staff to use, they will have control over all of these assumptions and the inputs that go into generating these projections that we use. So for our kind of baseline scenarios here, we've tried to use fairly conservative estimates on the revenue side and the expenditure side to try to not overstate too far positively or negatively what we think will be happening in the next 5 to 10 years. Personnel costs, we tried to use a set of assumptions that were consistent with what the city of Santa Cruz has been using for their projections. We feel it's useful to have everybody working from a common set of assumptions. As far as the flexibility of the model, we do have the options in there for showing some of the impacts from, if there's a recession in the near future that would impact sales tax revenues. We've also got some, knobs and dials that we can use to change what we think, expenditures, both for personnel expenses and non-personnel expenses, and how they might change in future years. What did we have here? Our alternate scenarios, in that last box there, we talk about, we did run a couple of scenarios where we said, what happens if we get revenues that are a little bit higher than planned? And then we had another one that was saying, what happens if our expenses are higher than planned? And so we can run kind of best case, worst case scenarios so that, the board can see kind of what is the range of outcomes that they may be looking at. For our baseline projections here, we're looking at revenues around $20 million. The different sources are shown in the ring chart there. The biggest piece in there is the sales tax piece, which is about half. On the expenditure side, we've got the personnel issue, the biggest chunk of the pie there. But we've got significant segments there for the services and supplies to actually run the libraries, as well as the capital projects and the books and materials adding to the collection. So on the economic side of things, I talked briefly about recessionary impacts. We do have the option there of showing what the impacts might look like if there were another recession that pulled back on the revenues from sales taxes. Investment returns, because there is a bit of a reserve right now that can be invested. That's it's not a huge chunk of the pie, but it does help. And so to the extent that you see different returns from some of your cash holdings right now, we can build those into the model. It's basically the same kind of thing with interest rates and housing trends. We've seen interest rates have been on the rise, and so that's having some impact in terms of just economic impacts as well as housing. Okay, so key assumptions in here. On the property tax side, we were assuming that property taxes would rise at about 3.75% annually. It's in line with what we've seen recently, and we're trying to be consistent with what we see with other financial plans in the region. Sales and use tax, we're looking at just shy of 3% growth per year in that area. On the MOE, there's projections that are actually already set for the next several years based on some negotiations that have been going on. So we've been using those estimates for the next few years, and then it would rise between 1% and 2% after that period. Grants and donations we were going to assume would be static. Interest, we were figuring about a 4% return. And then minimum reserves, we set the minimum cap there at 20% consistent with policy. On the expenditure side, we've got salaries that we're anticipating would go up 3.5% per year. The vacancy rate that's quoted on that slide is talking about vacant positions and staffing. And so in recent years, the library has had some challenges in filling some vacant positions. So currently there's essentially a credit in there for positions that would be unfilled. The model is anticipating that those positions will be filled over the next couple of years, and so that vacancy rate comes down. Healthcare costs are going up. Pension costs are based on what we're seeing from the state. Supplies and services are going up about 2.3% annually through the next 5 to 10 years. And then books and materials, we're setting the purchase of those collections at 8% of operating revenue per policy. And a capital outlay is normally kind of lumpy because you'll have a few years where you've got big expenditures and other years where you don't have much, but for the model, we were assuming about 430,000 a year average, and that was based on both building improvements and systems improvements and new equipment and that kind of thing. Yeah. Oh, did we double touch? This just shows a few of the screens that are available in the model. Input screen talking about the assumptions where we can change what we think the percentages are going to be for inflators over the course of the planning period. A fund summary that shows what we think is happening in terms of revenues and expenditures and the balance between them. And then some charts at the bottom showing, in this case, we had some CalPERS costs, we had staffing at each of the branches, and we had expenditures between the administrative function and the various branch locations. It's just, there are other screens and other charts, but this was just kind of a sampling of what's available out of the model.
Very good. Yeah. We know that there are some of you on this. When playing with the model, we're happy to send it to you and let you have an opportunity to be able to take a look at it in the interest of time today, instead of getting a demonstration of the model, how we just wanted to basically paint the picture in terms of what the model indicates. And it indicates that there is a structural gap that the JPA will face that grows to about a $2.5 million per year gap between revenues and expenditures. And a lot of that is due to the fact of the cost of the unfunded actuarial liability that will increase through 2033 with CalPERS, as well as just really an imbalance in terms of some of the revenues that are expected to come in and their growth rate versus the expenditures that might grow in terms of being able to recruit and retain the employees that you need to be able to serve this community. And so it has the ability and the potential to grow up to about 2.5 million. But again, if no corrective action were taking place, which we know you would, but if no corrective action were taking place, it would potentially reduce the reserves, which are shown on the right-hand side, below the 30%, the 20% reserve threshold by 2030, and then below zero by 2052. If we go to the next slide, which shows then how would you address that baseline forecast, it would basically require budget strategies that total ongoing of about $2.1 million per year implemented by 2029. And in doing so, that would eliminate, it would give you time to be able to use some of the reserves that you have, to be able to maintain reserves at above that 50% minimum reserve policy and eliminate the fiscal gap within that 10-year period. And so those are what these charts show. You might want to implement more. Circumstances go, remembering that the numbers never sleep. You may want to implement more budget strategies. And what is a budget strategy? It can be anything from a revenue enhancement to a cost efficiency perspective, expenditure controls and cost shifts, looking at doing services in a different way that is more cost effective before you would ever then look at going to reduce the two other scenarios that we wanted to paint, because we shared with the forecast is the sales tax forecast that Matt had indicated is coming from the sales tax consultant that you have that has provided those information. They're a little bearish on the future, I think. And they have historically been at around, or they're seeing that maybe the future holds only about a 2.5% to 3% growth factor. If we assume that inflation might increase by more than 3% and be at a stable 3 to 3.5%, it's not unreasonable to think that you will be able to see a little bit better growth of that in the future. And so what we did is we decided to make some adjustments here. So firstly, what we did is, while you look at a median list price today, I looked at this today from Western Title. There is a little bit of a softening in terms of the median list price of home prices right now. And there's a lot of inventory that's built up in San there's a Capitola, it's got Valley in the unincorporated county area. So that could be a cause for why we have kept the growth factor for property tax a little lower, perhaps. But if we get back to the time where things are doing well, we're seeing turnover, you know, could you get up to 5% property tax? Even if you use 5% property tax growth assumption and a 4% ongoing sales tax growth, it makes it rosier, but it doesn't eliminate the gap. So what that says is that there's something more than just using the baseline revenue assumptions to be able to assume that this could be addressed in and of itself. There would need to be some type of budget strategies implemented based on those assumptions that we have in the expenditure side. On the other side, we go to the next one. If we change some assumptions on the expenditure side, where we look at inflationary factors being at about 4% growth, who would have ever thought we'd get 8, 9, 10% growth again, right? Like we just have. If we assume ongoing, there might be a 4% inflationary factor. And also based on the preliminary report that's being worked on right now in terms of the cost of services and administrative support services from the city of Santa Cruz, if that increases based on what the preliminary report indicates, the gap widens. The gap, it grows to $4 million per year. And then you start hitting your third reserve threshold targets by 2028 and 2030. So the bottom line between these three different scenarios, of which the baseline was the one that we've left the model with you with, is and to inform your conversation, is that there is time to address the gap, but something will need to be done. And whether it's 1.7 million or 4 million, somewhere in that range, there's going to need to be some budget strategies to be implemented to be able to address that ongoing gap. And so that's kind of the story that we have, that the model really indicates. I've already covered that, and there was a couple of slides that, in the interest of time, I just kind of decided to not discuss today, but it was some recommendations that we have in terms of how do you address capital outlay within the JPA for the future. This is not talking about what we just had the conversation about the financing authority and all the relationships that you have already and the lease agreements that you have with the various cities in terms of the properties, but it's instead, how do we address, ongoing capital needs? And we had some recommendations that were provided in the report, but we'll do that further. So with that, we're happy to answer any questions. And so, take back to you.
All right, thank you for the presentation. Do we have any questions from board members? I have a question. You talked about the growth in the property tax in a specific rate, and then you talked about the growth in the MOE. How did you differentiate that? Because the property tax flows through the MOE.
You're right. Yeah. So what we do is we pull out the amounts that are already tagged, if you will, for Scotts Valley and Capitola, and brought those and determined, okay, what's going to happen with that growth factor? And then what happens with the overall MOE? So what we did is we tried to differentiate between that to make some sense of where could there be potential growth there. And then if the full MOE doesn't grow beyond this 1 to 1.8% from the city of Santa Cruz, especially in the county, then what will be the impact in terms of the funding of the library?
Okay, but it seems like if you change the property tax growth rate, but you don't change the assumed MOE growth rate, there's no effect on this JPA, right?
There, it depends on what you end up doing with the
remainder.
Yes. Yeah.
Interesting. Guess I'd have to dig into the model a little bit more deeply to understand that better.
Yeah, we've tried to break out the sources specifically so that you can see what happens with each of the different components. So again, in the interest of time, we didn't want to spend a whole hour going over the model here in the meeting, but
sure,
it's there to be played with.
Yeah. So was there a model where you assume, let's just say 4.5% growth in the just into the JPA?
Yeah, you could definitely do that within the model itself. And so we did not give you a scenario that showed that, but what that would do is, again, remember, this model is flexible
Sure.
and is dynamic. It allows you to make changes to assumptions on the fly to see what the impacts are. But the existing one that we have there is showing a combination of about 3.25%, 3.75%. Smaller amount. Yeah. If you grew it to 4%, you're at about just less than $10 million in total. For MOE in the year, roughly about $10 million. It's a difference of between 400,000 and 350,000, 300,000. So the impact is not very great when it comes to making, whatever assumptions you're using for that.
That's one of the things we'll be going over when we're working on, training and demonstrating this model, is showing some of the sensitivities in there and saying, if we change some of the revenue sources, or if we change some of the expenditure assumptions, what does each one of those do in terms of the big picture? And so you can identify where the big movers are, versus there are areas where you could double a particular component and it would barely move the needle overall because it's just a smaller piece of the pie. And so that's one of the things that will come out as people get used to the model and seeing which assumptions have the biggest impacts overall.
Thank you, that makes sense. All right, are there any other questions from board members?
I have a question about staffing and, it's hard to predict in the future, like what growth of staffing is going to be needed. So here, it looks like you're building in an escalator of 4% per year. And I'm just wondering if that is, 4% per year to me sounds like that's just existing staff costs rising. It's not looking at needing new staff, over the next 10 years. And I'm just curious, I don't know if this is a question for you or for Eric, as far as, I know as we're reopening branches and we're trying to get these libraries fully staffed, do we need a scenario where we look at we're going to need to add X percentage of staff over the next 10 years in order to maintain service for the community? And was that factored in?
Eric?
Well,
I can take it if you like.
yeah, I think you were gonna say that you can play with the numbers to add in and see what the model.
Right, we
What's
have
the existing one?
we have a staffing component in the existing model that based on current staff.
Mm-hmm.
The 4% that you were looking at was just an inflator for what each person would cost in addition each year. But the model, we can add FTEs or fractions of FTEs on the administrative side and in each branch so that you could see if we're adding staff or moving staff around, how that impacts expenditures across the whole system.
But there's no new staff.
And in addition, the model is flexible model in terms of being able to then also looking at, the implementation of different technologies like RFID or other things that would have an upfront cost, on the GPA, right? But then long-term pay for itself in terms of reduced staffing. And I believe our library expert was saying somewhere between 6 to 10 years or so could be a payback period for the investment in that technology that helps much longer shelf life. So there are some opportunities for, another budget strategy that can be implemented as well. From service perspective as well.
And we should capture a little bit of staffing in the baseline in terms of that vacancy assumption, which, had been running higher than 10%, and we peeled that back 7% to 5 to 3%, figuring that we'll be filling those positions in the next year or two. And so that's part of that imbalance that we were talking about, is due to the fact that we'd be getting closer to the full complement of staff.
Okay, thank you. Are there other questions for board members? Seeing none, we'll go to public comment. Are there any comments on the fiscal model?
Indeed, thank you for that presentation. Talk about investments in technology. I think we need investments in more folks. I think technology is actually a problem with all the computers. I myself rarely go to the library because it's painful experience with all the radiation. We talked about the pandemic and the impacts, and it's had impacts all over. And again, I refer to this book. I'm just going to read a little section on fiscal impact. This is the real Anthony Fauci, Kennedy Jr. And this section is economic destruction and shifting wealth upward during the COVID pandemic. And I know you're all readers of this. Dr. Fauci served as ringmaster in the engineered demolition of America's economy. And I'll add, this includes the libraries. His lockdown predictably shattered the nation's once booming economic engine, putting 58 million Americans out of work and permanently bankrupting small businesses, including 41% of Black businesses, some of which took generations of investment to build. The business closures contributed to a run-up in the national deficit. The interest payments alone would cost about $1 trillion annually. I know the county is paying big time on interest. That ruinous debt will likely permanently bankrupt the New Deal program, the social safety net that since 1945 fortified, nurtured, and sustained America's envied middle class. Government officials have already begun liquidating the almost 100-year legacies of the New Deal, New Frontier, the Great Society, and Obamacare to pay the accumulated lockdown debt. Will we find ourselves saying goodbye to school lunches, healthcare, WIC, Medicare, Medi-Cal, university scholarships, and other long-standing assistance programs? That's the context we're in, and it's very sorry to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other comments on the long range fiscal model? Go ahead.
On page 5 of their report, it says financial forecasting, things within the city's control. By city, I'm assuming we can apply that to the JPA. First one is setting fees and charges. So you might want to re-examine that decision to no longer charge for meeting room spaces. A modest fee, maybe it would add up over time. And the last thing on their website, determining type and level of investment in capital project infrastructure investment. This comes right back to the annex. $5 million of Measure S went for that. I was over there yesterday. Perfectly nice, but did we really need to get, an investment? Was that a good investment in infrastructure when we have so many other needs and the other branches will have future needs? Grand jury agreed that that was not a great expenditure of Measure S funds. It's like, it's my bugaboo, but it might come back in the end to negatively impact the library's future. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Is there any other public comment on the long-term fiscal model? Bring it back to the board for any discussion. Well, I want to thank Steve and the entire team for putting this together. I think it's really helpful for us to look ahead. And obviously, our board has been very focused on the budget and the growing deficit and how we're going to deal with that. I think in the long term, looking at the MOE is going to be a path we're going to have to examine. And obviously, looking at as you identified, the budget strategies is going to be a key part of moving forward. So thank you. So with that, do we need a motion today on this, or are we good to just move on?
Okay,
Just move on. Okay. Should we dive into the budget or we want to take a quick break? Okay, why don't we take a 5-minute break and we will reconvene at 10:41.
Yeah. What did I do?
What's your UA album? It's flat before that, it's gonna be flat and then
Does it seem like
10 years, certain
where you
point.
did that?
No, it's a.
But you're in-
And then I have to.
Okay.
So.
All right. Think we have everybody we need in the room to kick off stuff.
Yes.
Ready to go? Okay, I'll call the meeting back to order. Bring us to our next order of business, which is item 90, which is the fiscal year 25 library final operating budget. Do we have a staff presentation, please?
Hey, we've submitted, the report. This is, of course, the same, report we brought to you last time we met, with one exception. We changed the amount for the collection, based on the conversation we had with the board previously. Take it to 10% rather than 8%, but we're using the surplus to make up that 2% difference. So, it is getting us to a healthier, level for our collection.
Okay. So that's the presentation?
That's
That's what we got. Board members, do we have any questions? Okay. I do have a question about the capital outlay and then the books. So on consent, we approved funding for the opening day collection at Maine this year. Is that in this coming budget, is that a portion of the materials budget?
Yes.
Okay,
So we're putting aside, just as we've done for the other, larger branches, we put aside a percentage, in preparation for the opening day collection.
okay. Okay, so, but the number was pretty significant. We were talking about like the branch. What was the branch isn't gonna be open for how many years? 4 years?
2028.
2028. So by then, there's gonna be,
And it is gonna be a significant amount that we're gonna have to purchase for it. when we
okay,
do open.
okay. Thinking Capitol, I don't know, if that's how we did our opening day collection. I feel like it may have been like 50-50 match between friend contributions and the JPA. Is that kind of a piece of the puzzle of what you're sort of,
I know we're putting aside the same percentage that we did for Aptos. I don't know if you can say what percentage of the budget we put aside for Capitola.
Well, we haven't designated the 10% for each branch. We've just taken
That-
10% off the top for opening day collections and then used what we needed on each branch.
Okay. And so, and I would say that, so we're taking right now the same 10%, for those of you who didn't hear her, that we did for opening the others. I would say the difference is, of course, this is gonna be our largest library.
yeah, no, understood, understood. Okay. And then the way we're doing the capital expenditures, I know we've been growing that and holding it flat this year. And then we're sort of taking 150,000 for the generator this year and throwing 100,000 into kind of the ongoing budget. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And when we chart out future fiscal years, is that 100 flat or does it go back to 250? When you think moving into the future? Or is that just getting too far out there?
I think at this point it's gonna depend, but, Kara, I don't know if you wanna add to that.
Well, we'll just be up to our budget strategy and how we address shortfall.
Yeah.
If we tap into that.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand. 250 for
So we,
capital or?
yeah, so we had that capital fund, I think Susan Nimitz established it, remember we were
Yeah.
growing it at like $50,000 a year. So this year in the budget, what they did, was they put $100,000 what we're doing is we're putting $100,000 in kind of our ongoing expenditures for capital, and then there's 150 that we've identified as a one-time expenditure for the generator. So those two numbers combined go to the 250.
Yeah.
And I was just asking about kind of in our long-term thinking, we have 100 in recurring capital. Is that? And it
That's
sounds
what
like
the model.
Yeah,
we're
We're
talking about.
430, I think, a model that would grow by $20,000 a year.
also all the way to 430 in that long-term model. Yeah, I think that's gonna be a really interesting question. I mean, we have leases with most of the jurisdictions and the branches. I don't think the city of Santa Cruz has leases, and kind of figuring out how we do capital expenditures in those city of Santa Cruz branches is gonna be a thing to figure out. We're still gonna have the major equipment purchases, obviously, but whether 250 or 400, what the right number is gonna be, I don't know in the long term. Okay. Is there any public comment on the proposed final fiscal year 25 operating budget? We'll do 2 minutes for public comment this morning. Okay, seeing that, I'll close public comment and bring it back to the board. Any discussion or action?
Okay, well, thank you for your work on the budget. It's looking a lot better than years past in terms of the information provided to the board. I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
And also you made the adjustments we requested at the prior meeting, so I appreciate that as well. Term, we do have issues, so we're gonna have to wrestle with those in the years ahead. But for now, I think this is a good budget, and I would go ahead and move approval of the budget.
Second.
Okay, before we take a vote, one of the things I just would like to say is I'm, in looking at talking about kind of the staffing this year for the Santa Cruz branch, we made the decision in this budget to say, okay, Sunday hours are happening in Maine. We got a lot of great information kind of about the demographics between kind of a regional approach between a capital of Felton or a capital of Scotts Valley balance versus doing it all in Maine. That's fine. That's the way this budget's prepared. I think I'm okay this year. I want to keep the door open to future conversations in future years about, is it always Sunday? Is that the way we're always going to do Sunday service, or do we bounce back and forth for sort of regional balance at times? So I just kind of want to put that placeholder out there that it's a conversation that we can have moving forward in future budgets, and not assume that this is the way it's done forever. So we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion?
I think we always have to be flexible and keep adjusting with the needs of the community and keep being responsive to them every year as we move forward. So I agree with what you're saying and think we've got to just keep doing that. I mean, it is, when we talk about staffing, just looking at the personnel authorization report here, from 2 years ago, we're going from 102 staff to the current 115 staff. So that's a pretty significant increase in number of staff, and kind of goes to my question about long-term forecasting. Is that because we're ramping up opening new branches and now we're going to hold steady, or are we still in a trajectory where we aren't able to fully staff all of these branches? And to Jamie's point, the number of service hours that we need. So I think that's a factor we're going to have to continue to monitor.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's really important. I think it's important to note that, Sunday service is important for different areas in our community. And, we looked at those demographics for those of you who weren't at our meeting last time and saw, the populations, basically, if we're only able to do so much staffing on Sundays, do we allocate it in Maine? Do we do kind of, 2 outposts throughout the county? And we came to the decision, let's do it in Maine. But I think adapting and moving forward and not always just saying, hey, that's the way it's going to be. Because sometimes I know that's the way things happen in large organizations. So, any further discussion? Okay, so we have a motion and a second on the floor to approve the final fiscal year 25 library operating budget. I'll do a voice vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries unanimously. Thank you, staff. Thank you, Kira. Good work. Okay. So this next item is the adoption of a resolution approving the library director employment agreement and authorize staff to, authorize the board chairperson to execute the employment agreement. Is there any staff presentation on this?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Not a PowerPoint presentation, but I just wanted to go over a bit of our journey. Recruitment is a huge dedication of time for many, especially when we have a competitive candidate pool. I'm bringing it back. The original application closed in the beginning of February, and here we are in June. And that was a lot of time dedicated not only to our community panel, and that we went through the interview process, as well as 6 meetings in April that included line staff, as well as library management to meet and greet all our candidates. So today, what we're looking for your rules and our MOU is unanimous vote from all directors to appoint Christopher Platt, 24 years of library experience since 2005. And he began in Queens Library, worked his way up through the New York Public Library since 2005, and most recently worked with Mono County since 2008 as their library. Available if there's any questions, and that's all I have.
Okay, thank you so much. Are there any questions by board members? Okay, is there any public comment on this item?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll do public comment at 2 minutes on this.
I've seen a number of library directors come and go over the years because I've been in the county over 4 years. I'd like to see included in your process here to have the library director adhere to and post this library bill of rights and assure that donated and requested books are added to the library collection, as well as I'd like to see this dangerous Wi-Fi removed. This little, I have a few of these Wi-Fi in the library or anywhere, convenience or did I help after? So it's the latter of my research. Library Bill of Rights, this is from the American Library Association. The American Library Association affirms that all libraries are forums for information and ideas, and that the following basic policies should guide their services. By the way, I received this because my sister went to her library in Sacramento, and this was posted on the door. Number 1, books and other library resources should be provided for the interest, information, and enlightenment of all people of the community the library serves. Materials should not be excluded because of the origin, background, or views of those contributing to their creation. 2, libraries should provide materials and information presenting all points of view on current and historical issues. Materials should not be prescribed or removed because of partisan or doctrinal disapproval. 3.
Thank you. That's your 2 minutes.
Let me read the last one. 3. Libraries should challenge censorship in the fullest of their responsibility to provide information and enlightenment.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And you can take one of these and have please.
Do we have any further public comment on this item? Seeing none, I'll close public comment and bring it back to the board for action.
Okay, I thought we did a very thorough process, and I appreciate all the work that staff did in the process, and looking forward to working with the new library director and hopefully having him stay here for a long time. So I'll move approval of the contract.
I'll second and echo Carlos's comments, but also add just an appreciation to Eric for stepping in as interim and all your hard work and this budget and everything else during this transition. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
I also wanted to add my appreciation to Eric. Nicole Coburn from the county and I worked a lot with Eric a few months for his interim directorship. and your passion and your heart and your love of the library system and library function was very apparent. And you've gotten a lot done in a short amount of time. And with this Baker Tilly model, the additional information in the fiscal year 2025, those are just examples of how much you've done and put your heart and soul into the organization. So I just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, all of you, for your help and support.
Yeah, I'd like to echo the comments of fellow board members. I know it's been a long road to get here. Your willingness to step in now twice now as an interim, it's really shows your dedication to our community and to our overall system. Staff also for helping out with the recruitment, and look forward to welcoming Christopher to the role. So with that, we have a motion and a second to voice vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? The motion carries unanimously. So that takes us to the next order of business today, which is the Live Oaks Annex MOU. We have a staff presentation this morning.
So, Chair, we've provided a report. This is something we're very eager to get going. The board should be aware that the space is now available for the public to use. We don't expect to use, or I should say, provide library services until the fall. But we do also have a board meeting. Our next one is planned to be at the annex, so you'll be able to see the space there. This is a really excellent opportunity for the community and for the library to connect with a very populous area, a very busy area. We've really enjoyed working with county parks and developing this idea. So we're very excited for it. And this is also, to some extent, the MOU represents a little bit of an experiment about how this is going to work. But I want to thank County Parks for being extremely supportive in helping to make this work out for us.
Are there questions by members of the board? Okay. The public comments on this item? Go ahead. 3 minutes.
I believe at the last minute, you, Mr. Goldstein and Mr. Bossier, you both wanted some confirmation and clarity about exactly what this annex is gonna be. Now we hear there's gonna be some books, and are there gonna be books? That would imply that there is a book drop, or even if people are just picking up holes, there's gonna have to be a self-checkout unit there. People are gonna need help with that. So I'm wondering, okay, first of all, the Board of Supervisors had this MOU on their agenda 2 days ago. And first I thought, well, why are they saying it before you? But I guess you're both in it together, so I wonder if any of you have heard any discussion about their consent agenda. I realize you can't answer that. What is it gonna cost? Who's gonna pay for the utilities, the operation, the maintenance, the landscaping, janitorial services, and the training of the county staff? How many hours are they gonna be there? How available are they gonna be? Are they gonna be knowledgeable about the library's policies and code of conduct? I was there yesterday, actually, at the annex, and yeah, it's attractive, but the study rooms are quite far away from wherever front desk of the Simpkins Center is. How is that gonna be monitored? And where in the county budget does it show that they're paying for all these different things? And as you know, county budget is in trouble, so can they keep it up, you know, their promises? So, you know, where's the, oh yeah, the writing, the text. It says the county may provide staffing. That should definitely be shall or will, because may is just, you know, leaves a lot to be interpreted. Okay, I won't go on and on. Over there, seems like a very expensive waiting room for the community, and Live Oak seems overserved compared to other communities. Davenport, they get the book reveal a couple hours a week. So Live Oak has plenty of library services now. Thank you.
All right, is there any other public comments?
I would like to see the questions that are just posed to you responded to. Can you respond to the questions that were just asked? Yeah, those are serious. And I also listened to the Board of Supervisors meeting yesterday. Some serious question. I don't quite get the purpose of annex. Maybe you can explain that. Okay.
All right, is there any other public comment on this item? All right, we'll bring it back to the board for discussion.
Well, I'll just say that, this is a project that has been very important to the Board of Supervisors. It's a unique project that provides for the library to do more outreach to the youth in that area that are already coming to the school. It's right adjacent, as well as Simpkins recreation facility. We have talked years and years about how the library is no longer just a traditional library, but it's more about reaching out to the community, and we have a mobile unit, and this is in some ways similar to that. I think this is just a start. I think I really look forward to the vision from library staff as this grows in the future. And I actually hope that there's other annexes in the future in other jurisdictions and other ways to get to the community. This is going to be for young people. And I think the board had that vision, and our Parks Department is serving a lot of young people and is very eager and happy to assist in staffing the facility. So I look at it as a great collaboration between parks and the library system. And also I look for this to grow in the future and possibly even expand to other areas as well, this kind of concept. So anyway, with that, I'll just thank the library staff for working on this MOU, as well as Jeff Gaffney's here from County Parks. I appreciate your work on it. It's a great agreement. And again, I look at it as a start, and I hope that we can grow and expand the services in the future and get young people more resources. That's what this is all about. And so with that, I'll move approval of the MOU.
All right, there's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Appreciate bringing the MOU. You know, I think that there's been a lot of questions for a long time, kind of about how the annex was gonna fit in the overall library system. I think making it clear that it's not a branch is important, because, you know, given the presentation we got about the long-term fiscal projections, you know, I think it's very likely we're gonna have some hard decisions we're gonna have to make in the future. The notion that, you know, as identified in the MOU, that this is really a space for programming for the Live Oak branch, that it builds that in then to the service levels in Live Oak, which there's a contractual relationship between the Live Oak service levels and the Capitol and the Scotts Valley service level. So I appreciate that, kind of getting that level of clarity. So I think it's good to start putting it in writing. I think there are some good long-term questions that were raised by members of the public, and I think that's gonna have to be worked out, I think, in the kind of the next step, which is some sort of, you know, the MOU is fine, but we're gonna have to have at some point, you know, how we do liability and risk and things like that. I would assume some sort of lease type agreement for the space. So look forward to seeing that. Is there any further discussion by members of the board?
The language on the motion, it says endorse. Does that mean there are potential edits to the MOU language versus like how draft is this? Because for instance, would be the security cameras mentioned in here. That's not something the parties can agree to without talking to bargaining units, for instance, like that comes under the MOU implications with our bargaining units. And there's a couple other things in here.
Yeah.
That could have impacts.
I think when we wrote this too, it hadn't yet gone to the county for their approval too, so they needed signature. So now it has, and
Okay, so the county has signed it as it is right now.
yes,
Okay.
that's correct, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Yeah, I guess related to that, I mean, this, you sort of alluded to this as a bit of a pilot project or
Right.
experiment. And it, I don't see the term that ends, it's just a start. And so I guess at some point we would look at potentially amending this, if there's issues that are raised that weren't thought of in the initial drafting. Is that the process we'd be looking at?
Um,
Or did I miss it?
yeah, I'm sorry. Can you restate your question?
Well, I just see that this MOU, it's basically into perpetuity. There's no term limit associated with like, hey, we're gonna try this for 2 years and then see where we're at or something. It just says we're entering into this, but I don't. It just says it can be terminated at any time, but there's no point at which there would trigger this thing's expiring and we need to relook at it. Which is probably fine, but I think, to Laura's point and Jamie's point, there's probably gonna need to be amendments or adjustments as we learn through this relationship over time.
Right, and I know that the intent was to review it in a year conversations, to see where we are at. And so that is something we could certainly do for the board too, is bring it back in a year and report on its status.
I think that makes sense. I mean, I will point out that in the MOU, it basically that there's gonna be a multi-purpose room that can be scheduled for programming by the libraries. And that's kind of either that and providing the training and the reservations is sort of the obligation of the JPA. I know we have plans to do more this year, but the obligations are relatively limited to both parties. So I think as this relationship evolves and we figure kind of out exactly how it works, whether it belongs in the MOU, I presume, like I said, there'd be some sort of follow-on lease or something. Maybe there won't be, I'm not sure. But I do think that bringing it back in time probably makes sense.
Yeah, and I think under 8F, it does read that, and that you are correct, Chair. The intent is to develop a lease with the county.
Yeah.
And so it does call out that this won't supersede that lease.
Yeah.
And Chair, I just wanted to, I'm sorry, if I take a second, Jeff Gaffney with Senator County Parks. We would have gone through our 3rd year of not being able to use our community rooms at Simpkins, and because the construction was kind of hung up on this a little bit, and so Eric was kind enough to have worked with us to make sure that we were able to get the space open, because this space is physically like connected to our community rooms. And so being able to do this a little bit early and get this MOU moving, we left a lot of room for us to have the ability to interactively work to make sure that this works for both of us. And so we definitely are going to spend a lot of time talking about how we can improve it and make it better. And the lease is something we actually have already started working on our site, and we will be coming forward with. It's going to be sort of standard lease like you have with other facilities. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Okay. Yeah, I will note that I think it's my suggestion is that it would probably be a bit of a different lease than we have for the other facilities. The other facilities, there's a lot of obligations that are on the library system to maintain it up to, I think it's, to remember what it is, we have JPA has to pay up to $100,000 a year in maintenance first, and then, so it seems like it's gonna be a different thing, given it's not a branch.
We already talked about it. It's a swim center. We're not going to charge. I mean, there's a lot of things that are going to be different, and we're definitely respectful of that. And, but for the most part, we're going to try to, and we'll be taking care of the maintenance of the facility. We won't be paying for any maintenance of the bathrooms that are there. So those are ours. We're going to take care of.
Sure.
As we were saying, there's a lot of benefits that are going to be realized. Take advantage of that library's kindness to.
Well, thank you. I think we have a motion and a second on the floor, is that correct? We've taken public comment. All right. With that, I'll do a voice vote. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously, and we have a interim director, you're authorized to sign this MOU on behalf of the JPA. So,
Thank you.
With that, it takes us to comments by board members. Does anyone have any more comments for us this morning? Seeing none, our schedule of upcoming meetings, which is August 1st, 9 a.m. at the Live Oak Annex. And with that, we're adjourned. Thank you all for attending.
Yeah.